Happy Sunday, and thank you for joining me today. It was a Sunday morning, and just before 8 a.m., hundreds of Japanese fighter jets descended on the base, where they somehow managed to annihilate and completely destroy 20 American naval vessels. This included 8 battleships and more than 300 planes. The death toll reached more than 2,400 Americans, including civilians. Another 1,000 people were wounded. This is on December 7th, 1941. The president was Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Here was the news reporting from the time.
Through crowded streets, America's great war leader, the late President Roosevelt, drove to the Capitol.
On December 8, 1941, President Roosevelt appears before a joint session of Congress.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Hostilities exist. There is no blinking at the fact that our people, our territory, and our interests are in grave danger. With confidence in our armed forces, with the unbounding determination of our people, we will gain the inevitable triumph, so help us God. I ask that the Congress declare that since the unprovoked and dastardly attack by Japan on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, a state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
1 hour and 20 minutes after the president's address, Congress declares war on Japan.
That was December 7th, 1941, and the United States had been spontaneously attacked by Japan. The following day, we officially entered World War II, as you just heard the reporter say there. World War II began in 1939 and ended in 1945 when Japan surrendered to the United States after President Harry S. Truman dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. It was the atomic bomb that he dropped on Hiroshima in 1945, and that's what essentially concluded that war, and that's how the United Nations was born. So World War II lasted from 1939 to 1945, so it lasted for 6 years, and we entered the war at the end of 1941 after being spontaneously attacked by Japan. The following year, on January 14th, 1942, it was announced that a tank destroyer tactical and firing center would be created near Killen, Texas. General Andrew D. Bruce was chosen as the first commander, and on September 18th, 1942, Camp Hood was officially opened and had been used for armored training ever since. The installation was named in honor of General John Bell Hood, which was a Confederate general who fought during the Civil War. The mission at Camp Hood was immediately expanded to include a replacement and basic training center at North Fort Hood. At times, as many as 100,000 soldiers were being trained in order to prepare for the war. The Texas State Historical Association writes, quote, "During the later part of the war, some 4,000 German prisoners of war were imprisoned at Camp Hood," end quote. By 1950, the camp was rendered the permanent status or the permanent name of Fort Hood. And just looking back on that history now as just being such an interesting, intricate part of Fort Hood's history, that now leads you to now. In 2009, there was a mass shooting at Fort Hood. This was ABC News reporting at the time.
We're learning is just more and more about what actually happened here. It seemed to be a combination of the worst circumstances. A group of unarmed young soldiers getting ready to deploy in a confined area. Somebody literally getting up out of a seat and a random violent action. We must remember, these are young men and women who are preparing for the worst overseas. They never expected this kind of chaos to attack them at home.
Tornado sirens signal the attack on the massive army post. Home video catches police cars racing to the scene. At 1:30 p.m., gunfire rings out near the heart of Fort Hood at the Soldier Readiness Center, where those about to be deployed go for medical treatment. The enemy, one of their own, an officer, Major Nidal Hassan, who burst into a waiting area in the building, opening fire with a handgun and semi-automatic weapon, which can fire more than a bullet every second. Allegedly, Hassan shoots 2 private security guards early on to make it easier to kill. He shoots over 40 people, 13 of whom would die. The victims are sucked into the ambush. Soldiers are unarmed and unable to defend themselves. However, in seconds, they adapt and overcome the assault, scrambling for cover and blocking the doors to an adjacent college graduation, keeping 600 plus out of harm's way. Before the shooting spree is even over, jackets, shirts, even clean diapers are used to bandage the wounded.
God bless these soldiers and these great Department of the Army civilians. The quick reaction, I'm sure this could have been much worse.
Within minutes, local police respond. Hassan is shot 4 times, twice by a female civilian officer who was first to the scene and also injured in the gunfight. Hassan was believed dead at the scene, but actually survived and was put on a ventilator. Motive is still unclear. This surveillance video obtained by CNN from a convenience store shows him in the early morning hours before the shooting. He chats with a clerk who for the first time notices he is wearing traditional Muslim attire. Hassan is said to have complained of being hassled by other soldiers for being a Muslim and was in fact disciplined for preaching to patients and colleagues about that faith. Hassan, an Army psychiatrist, was also reportedly upset about his upcoming deployment to Iraq and America's military presence there. The day's events were a reversal of fortune for soldiers at Fort Hood. Usually it is those at home worrying about those abroad. Instead, with the base on lockdown, children kept inside classrooms, and police on every street, it was those off base desperate for information.
Yeah, that's my husband texting me right now from Iraq. So the guys over there just found out what's going on. Yeah, he's really upset and he's freaking out.
Early on, there was great confusion. Reports of 2 more shooters. 2 suspects are even apprehended, but later released. With cell phones jammed, people turned to Twitter for communication. Not too sure where the shooter is at right now. My building is on lockdown. A community shocked by a sadness that's shared by the entire country.
It's difficult enough when we lose these brave Americans in battles overseas. It is horrifying that they should come under fire at an Army base on American soil.
That was President Obama. That was also an ABC News special on that situation at Fort Hood, that 2009 mass shooting at Fort Hood. In 2014, there was another shooting at Fort Hood. 4 people were dead and 16 others were wounded. It was just absolutely horrific. It was another devastating shooting at Fort Hood after just suffering the shooting in 2009, where many were dead and many were wounded. In 2014, another one transpired. 4 people were left dead and 16 others were wounded. Here was CNN just 6 years ago remembering the victims of that Fort Hood shooting.
Sergeant First Class Danny Ferguson is being remembered as a hero, sacrificing his life to protect a room full of others, using his own body as a barricade in front of a door to keep the gunman out. His fiancée, Kristen Haley, was nearby when the gunfire erupted.
He held that door shut because there's no locks. If he was not being the one against that door holding it, that shooter would have been able to get through and shoot everyone else.
A talented athlete, friends say he was destined for greatness. Ferguson had just returned from a tour in Afghanistan. His fiancée says he died doing what he loved, serving his country.
He did have a pleasure serving. Like, this was his life, and he was so proud to be a part of such a great service.
A counselor and father of two, Sergeant Timothy Owens just signed up for another 6 years in the Army. Recently remarried, the 37-year-old dedicated his life to helping fellow soldiers. His mother tried calling her son when she heard about the shooting.
He didn't answer the phone, so I left a message on his phone. Son, call me so I know if you're okay or not. Well, never got no call from him. I thought, oh God, please don't let it be.
And Sergeant Carlos Lazani Rodriguez enlisted as soon as he could, at age 18. Described as a caring leader, the native Puerto Rican had a 20-year career in the Army. He planned to retire at the end of this year. Among the 16 wounded, Sergeant Jonathan Westbrook, a former bank teller and dedicated father of three from Mississippi who joined the Army 3 years ago. Westbrook worked in the office where the shooting began. He was hit by 3 bullets in his chest and one of his arms. And New York State native Major Patrick Miller is in stable condition after 2 surgeries. The 2-time combat veteran also has master's degrees in business and public administration from Syracuse University. Friends call him the glue that keeps them together.
Obviously, this is a wound on his belt, but he'll move on.
Move on, but never forget.
In 2014, a Fort Hood soldier was accused of leading a prostitution ring. The following year, in 2015, the soldier pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Cairo 7 News reported in August that at least 12 soldiers have went missing at Fort Hood. Also in August, we learned of this news. This was reporting from KETK-NBC News. Listen to this.
New details this morning. A child prostitution ring involving 2 Fort Hood soldiers and 7 other men were busted by investigators. Police say that the 9 men responsible made agreements involving drugs, money, and alcohol through the use of social media. They also involved sex acts with girls aged 15 or 16. The girls turned out to be undercover officers, and no children were jeopardized in that operation. All men involved now face child prostitution charges.
Once again, as reporting from KETK-NBC News. Last month, the Army actually said that Fort Hood soldier specialist Vanessa Guillen died in the line of duty. Stars and Stripes reports, quote, in August, the base began searching for another missing soldier, Sergeant Elder Fernandez. After a week of searching, he was found dead in a temple. Temple of an apparent suicide. His family has said that Fernandez was sexually harassed and bullied by fellow soldiers. Guillen and Fernandez are 2 of 28 soldiers who have died at Fort Hood just this year. Including Guillen, 5 of those soldiers died by homicide, more than double than in the previous 4 years. 6 soldiers died by suicide, and another 6 deaths have not been classified. End quote. Once again, this is reporting from the Stars and Stripes newspaper. The Intercept last month essentially just broke a blistering report. They put this report on their website. This was by reporter Melissa Bosk at the Intercept, and here's the headline, quote, Army sergeants at Fort Hood fear for the safety of their soldiers. Here is the subheadline, quote, non-commissioned officers at the troubled base say they have little faith that military or congressional reviews will change the toxic leadership culture, end quote. Here is the lead from that article, and then I'm going to continue with the reporting. Quote, 7 non-commissioned officers responsible for the training and welfare of soldiers at Fort Hood, the sprawling U.S. Army base in Killen, Texas, said the environment there has become so dangerous that they fear for the safety of their soldiers. The 5 sergeants and 2 staff sergeants described a toxic leadership culture at Fort Hood that tolerates rampant drug use, sexual harassment, and misconduct on base, and in some instances has allowed service members accused of sexual assault to remain within their ranks. 3 of the NCOs said they've witnessed young soldiers in crisis who were ignored by their commanding officers and later attempted suicide. Since January, there have been 28 deaths at Fort Hood, including 5 homicides and 8 suicides. 4 of the deaths are still being investigated, including the most recent on September 2nd of Private Coralton Chi, 25 years old, who collapsed during a training exercise and later died. Over the last 5 years, more soldiers stationed at Fort Hood have been murdered on and off base than killed in battle. Quote, "I would be scared to send my kid to Fort Hood," end quote, said a sergeant who served in the Army for nearly a decade. Quote, "I don't think the leadership here at Fort Hood is doing a good job or any sort of job to protect their soldiers." Quote, "The NCOs who were interviewed individually over a span of several weeks agreed to speak with the Intercept on the condition that they remain anonymous, fearing retribution. They said they were compelled to come forward out of concern that no meaningful change will come from the military and congressional investigations launched in the wake of public outcry over the murder of 20-year-old Vanessa Guillen, a specialist in the 3rd Cavalry Regiment who was killed by another soldier at Fort Hood in April. Guillen's family has charged that leaders at Fort Hood mishandled the investigation into her disappearance, as well as the reports that she had been sexually harassed prior to her murder. Quote, "The public needs to know what's going on here," said one of the sergeants. Quote, "because I have no more faith in the federal system or the Army." End quote. Once again, this reporting from The Intercept, essentially just a blistering report of anonymous sources talking to The Intercept about the conditions at Fort Hood and how it has just become overwhelmingly just sad. The article continues, quote, in early August, quote, Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy apologized for failing Guillen and her family in a press briefing at Fort Hood, which he characterized as having, quote, the most cases for sexual assault and harassment and murders for our entire formation of the U.S. Army, quote, end quote. McCarthy also said that an independent review would be conducted by 5 civilian consultants, 4 veterans, and a former FBI agent into Fort Hood's leadership culture. The article continues, quote, 3 weeks after McCarthy's briefing, Major General Scott Eflin, base commander at Fort Hood, was removed from his post and reassigned as Deputy Commanding General for support at the base. At the time, Army Futures Command General John Murray announced an in-depth investigation into the conduct of the chain of command after Guillen's disappearance to accompany the review by the independent panel, which is scheduled to issue its final report on October 30th, end quote. Once again, reporting from The Intercept, just remarkable reporting on the conditions at Fort Hood and how it is honestly just sad. The situation where the Fort Jackson soldiers who reportedly died at that base, we are keeping an eye on that story. We have no further developments on that story yet. On Friday, we learned about the Fort Bliss soldier. The search for this missing soldier has now reached, on Friday, the search for that missing soldier reached its 100th day for Private Richard Halliday. They are still searching for the soldier. The El Paso Times writes, quote, as Private Richard Halliday's disappearance from Fort Bliss nears its 100th day, the 1st Armored Division gave a monthly update to remind anyone to come forward with information. Quote, today is day 99 since his disappearance. Halliday's family said in a statement read by Lieutenant Colonel Ali Payne, the public information officer for the 1st Armored Division. Quote, we will climb many mountains and follow any credible lead to find Richard. We love him, we miss him, and we want him to have a future. End quote. Once again, reporting for El Paso Times about that missing Fort Bliss soldier, still missing, reaching the 100th day on Friday. Earlier this week, a local news station actually spoke with one of the new acting senior commanders at Fort Hood, not only about the death of Vanessa Guillen, but about the leadership there. Listen to this.
Exclusive answers about the future of an embattled Army post straight from the top.
The murder of Fort Hood soldier Vanessa Guillen sparked international outrage. Her case also prompted a series of investigations into how the leadership on post cares for our soldiers on the home front.
That responsibility now falls on a new acting senior commander recently appointed to Fort Hood. Channel 2 investigator Robert Arnold spoke with him one-on-one.
Murdered by a hammer, burned, and then the dismembered and thrown to a river like she was nothing.
We're not going to stop until justice is served.
Her name became a rallying cry.
We want to know the truth. We want answers. We want accountability.
And her murder is forcing the Army to change how it treats its soldiers.
I think maybe we made some assumptions that we were taking care of people better than we really were.
Major General John Richardson is the new acting senior commander of Fort Hood and deputy commanding general of operations for 3 Corps.
We've had a lot of outside eyes come in and help us see ourselves, and they have uncovered some blind spots for us.
General Richardson says one of the biggest blind spots is a lack of trust between the soldiers and their leaders.
Our soldiers are watching everything that we do. They may not be saying anything, but they're watching.
Multiple investigations are underway into exactly why Fort Hood experienced 129 felonies a year over 5 years, crimes including homicide, sexual assault, and robbery.
So as a leader, that hurts. It hurts a lot.
General Richardson says 20 years of war caused an imbalance in the Army.
We were so focused on training that we didn't invest the time that we should have into our people.
To understand the importance of that statement, listen to what is instilled in JROTC cadets in high school.
We actually have 11 principles of leadership that the Army made in 1947, and one of them is know your people and, look out for their well-being.
Ian Russell has been preparing for life in the Army since middle school.
I really want to be able to say, I served, I did my part.
And Russell's mother, like thousands of other families, is both proud and worried.
I think I'll be worried probably every day.
What are you doing to allay fears for parents?
I think the real issue is we're attacking the trust deficit.
At the end of September, General Richardson shut down the Corps at Fort Hood for 5 days. He ordered his leaders to get to know their soldiers beyond the uniform. He also ordered his officers to make contact with the families of every soldier under their command.
When I heard that, I was really glad.
Yen's family was happy to hear about the changes too, but say it's not enough. 4-star General John Murray, in charge of investigating Vanessa's chain of command, recently visited the family's home.
They just came to our household just to give us the same report as always. We're still continuing the investigation. Well, where's the answers? You have 6 months already.
How do you regain that trust when so many of those leaders are still on post?
Number one, identifying who we're talking about, and that's part of the effort. Eventually, leaders will change.
For Vanessa's family, these changes are long overdue.
How many more have to die for her to be held accountable?
Another change the Army is making comes from Vanessa's case and involves missing soldiers. Within the first hour, a soldier is reported missing. Leaders on post are now required to visit that soldier's home or barracks, check social media accounts, and speak with friends. By the second hour, leaders are required to notify family members, local law enforcement, and check local hospitals. It is not until after a soldier is found unharmed and does not voluntarily return to his or her unit that soldier will then be considered absent without leave, or AWOL. Reporting live from Southeast Houston, Robert Arnold, KPRC, Channel 2 News.
Thank you, Robert.
Once again, that was exclusive reporting from Click 2 Houston News that actually got to interview the new acting senior commander at Fort Hood. So that came out on Friday, October 30th. We are going to keep an eye on this story and all of the stories that are taking place right now. This was our TJPS special report on the conditions and situation right now at Fort Hood, Fort Bliss, and Fort Jackson. We have much more ahead tonight on the Jeremiah Patterson Show. Stay with us. Much more ahead.